You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. This is episode 337, The Mandalorian, The Sin. My name is Albert Padilla, and we're glad that you're joining us today as we kind of continue with this kind of, we're revisiting The Mandalorian, right? It's been out for a while, but we just felt like, Jonesy and I really hadn't had a chance to kind of sit down and talk about The Mandalorian much together. And so given that the summertime is generally kind of slow in terms of Star Wars news, I figured can't think of a better time than just to come back and revisit this and talk about old friends and some of the great stuff that we missed or maybe caught during the series. So I'm going to bring him on now. Mr. Jonesy, how you doing, sir? Welcome to the show.
Doing great, man. How are you doing this week?
I am doing much better. We had a small hiccup on Sunday that I couldn't get out of. We had to reschedule this show. So we appreciate everybody that, was going to join us on Sunday night and then couldn't. So I know some of you are here. I can see you guys in the chat. So thank you guys for joining us. And sorry about the delay there.
Yeah, for those that don't know, we do a live stream on YouTube and Facebook, shooting for every Sunday at 9 Eastern, but again, kind of a reshuffle this week. But so invite everyone to join us if you're just listening to this on the standard podcast.
Right.
You can see Albert's smiling face.
No, that's not my smiling face. That's my
He gave us a
face.
really creepy smiley face, by the way.
Yeah, that was my creepy face, my creeper face. I say that we don't have a lot of stuff that happened in the summer, and then it just kind of turns out we've got a couple of news items that I want to talk about. First off, before we get started, the first one is Adraja, and I think that's how you pronounce her first name, or you can just call her Adraja. I think is what people are saying, Adraja, Ajorna or Arjona. But anyways, she's been cast officially in the Cassian Andor series, and I went out and I started looking just to kind of see what I don't think I've seen much that she's been in. Have you caught anything that she's been in prior to this?
No, I didn't really. I mean, I recognized a couple of them, but I haven't seen them. So, and she didn't look familiar to me at the very least, which I think is cool. I mean, Star Wars has always been about lesser known actors and things like that. So I think it's cool if she's going to play a significant role.
Yeah, no, I'd agree too. And that's not a slight on her. Again, like you, I saw what was it? True Detective, Person of Interest. I've heard of these shows. I've never watched them personally, so I can't really speak to, how well she is at acting or, her caliber of acting, anything like that. But I thought we could and we don't need to spend a lot of time on this. She's from Puerto Rico. She's Hispanic or of Hispanic origin. So is, what's his name? I'm drawing a blank on his name now.
Diego Luna?
Diego Luna. But any speculation right now, I know it's really early, but I mean, there's rumors of whether she's a mother, she's a sister. Is she going to be a love interest? Is she going to be his boss? I mean, it doesn't have to be a relationship, right? She could just be a partner with nothing there, which I think would be interesting for them to do. But any thoughts on who she's going to play or what you'd like to see her as?
Right. I mean, she's young, right? So the mother angle, some of those things seem less likely. I imagine it's just someone else in the rebellion or whatever, wherever this actually takes place. And I'm assuming this is still going to be in the rebellion days, not necessarily, and maybe some flashbacks here and there. So I imagine this is going to be someone in the rebellion that, is part of the, the crew, the gang, whatever you want to call it. Right. That is hopefully in the core. And again, I mean, it's tough to say. Did they say that she played a significant role or just
no? I mean,
this person showed up.
Right. I mean, it literally was just that she was cast and we can expect her in the series, but beyond that, there was nothing else. And so that alone was enough to generate all kinds of rumors in terms of who she was and what she was going to be doing.
Yeah. So I'm guessing one of the crew, and maybe there'll be some tension there. Wouldn't surprise me, I guess. Yeah. But again, they don't want to really, depending on what the actual time frame of this is going to be, you don't want to lessen what the impact of what Cassian and Jen had in Rogue One. Yeah. So I think there's a delicate balance to be had there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think as we get closer and they start releasing more details about the show, I think they're not going to, unless she's a secret character of some sort, which they probably wouldn't announce that she was in the show. Right. So my guess is as we get more details, more concrete details, that'll probably flesh out ahead of time. So the other thing we got was they did release the picture that I've seen. Of course, I've been kind of out of pocket the last few days, but the Mando Ultimate Visual Guide, which is coming on May 4th. That's a significant day. I don't know why, but May 4th, 2021, they are releasing this. This is the similar to the visual dictionaries that we used to get. But this is covering Mandalorian season 1 and season 2, which would make sense why it's got such a date that's pushed out so far out. But I guess the given, right? You're going to pick this up. I'm going to pick this up. We'll dissect.
We kind of have to. It's going to give us all the answers to the things we don't know that we need to know. So
you think so?
Which is, I don't know. I mean, you love this stuff, right? I mean,
oh yeah. If I don't have the answers,
right? We have to name all the characters in the background, right? We have to we have to name all of the tools, all the weapons, everything else that we didn't know that we thought they had. We didn't know that they had in the first place, but now we need to look and rewatch and look at every frame.
Right. Yeah, and if I don't have the answers from these books, I just go ahead and make them up. So it's better that they release them and give as many answers as they can, because otherwise they don't mind. Let's see. That was pretty much it. Again, not a whole lot going on during the summertime. Generally speaking, this is a really slow time for Star Wars news. Stuff starts to pick up in about a month or so. So, but that's all good, exciting stuff. Let's get into the show. We're going to talk about The Sin. This is chapter 3 of The Mandalorian. And now, just kind of a full disclosure. So Mike and I, this is like, we actually covered this. So there's an episode, I think I don't remember, 300, 301. It's all lost track. I've lost track of time. But there was an episode where Mike and I did cover this. So I have given some of my thoughts already on this show. Jonesy has not, which is I think is interesting. But I was trying to come up with other things to talk about. And there are some things that I hadn't really considered back when we first talked about. So hopefully you find something new here if you've already listened to that show. But I thought we'd start by just kind of real quick synopsis. And this is literally really quick. It says the Mando returns to Navarro with the bounty in hand. However, he begins to question whether turning in the child is the right thing to do. And we'll talk about that too in a little bit here, and just kind of the morality of all, and how his character starts to kind of take a turn here right in, we're 3 episodes into the series. But this episode was written by Jon Favreau. This was the first one directed by Deborah Chow. And I want to say this episode was nominated for Best Costume Design. So as we talked about the Emmys, I don't know if the last show or the one before, but this was nominated for Best Costume Design. And so when now that I watch this, I'm like looking at the costumes and really trying to figure out like, okay, was this worthy? And there definitely were a lot of great costumes in here. So I can see where they kind of gave them the nod. So
it was general. It wasn't anything in particular, just costume design in general.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Nothing specific.
Yeah, I could see that. There was a lot to look at in this episode.
Yes. And that's exactly right. But yeah, so it starts off aboard the Razor Crest, and the funny thing was, and I have this in the show notes, it says Yoda versus Sidious Attack of the Clones. And Jonesy, I bet you're wondering, like, what in the heck is he talking about here?
I had no idea what that actually referenced.
So this is like viewing number, 20 of this episode. And there was a moment there where baby Yoda, the child, if you will, is coming out of the floating walker, and he dangles by one hand and then lets go. And it wasn't until I saw it this time that I was like, hey, that's almost exactly like, Yoda dangling in Revenge of the Sith before he lets, or is it City? No. Yeah, I meant Revenge of the Sith. Sorry, not Attack of the Clones. When he lets go, he's kind of holding there. But that was...
At least we didn't get the fingernail scratch.
Yeah. I think they should have done that. That would have been just perfect. If they would have done that, if just had a little scratch there. But anyways, it was... That really wasn't that was kind of minor. But the client, I guess the more important thing is Grief Karga tells Mandalorian that the client is antsy. And it's more than, and that comes up a little bit later, but there's a sense that starts to build around the client really wanting to get this thing as quickly as possible and doing something with it, which we will definitely dive into here in a little bit. But and then I'll go one more quick thing, and I'll let you kind of speak to this opening scene because it is kind of short. But it's just that opening line of it's not a toy. And if you're a parent, I mean, how many times have you said this to your children before, right? That's not a toy. Put that thing away. Get that out of your mouth. Stop putting your finger in that, right? All these things come out. And this is great because it really does. I think this is the first episode where he starts to kind of have this father figure mentality. He starts harboring the child. And I think that's ultimately what makes him turn around. At least that parental guardian aspect of it all is really what makes him turn around and do a 180 in terms of what he was doing and start going down this different path of his life altogether. So just give me your kind of overall thoughts on that before we move into Navarro.
Yeah, I think it was a great scene of just him continuing to look back, and you don't really know what's going on in his head at this point. We don't know why he's even got any kind of attachment to the child at all. But you're right. When you have those moments, it does, especially if you're a parent, you remember these moments fondly where you feel like you got a slap of hand here and there just to make sure that someone doesn't get their hands on something they're not supposed to. And even the things that are harmless, sometimes you're like, please don't.
Yeah,
please don't.
Please don't go away.
It was a great scene. I love anytime we're in the cockpit of the Razor Crest too. I think it's just, great moments in there, great sounds, great lighting, great effects. And again, you get this kind of touching, interesting moment of development of where they're headed and their relationship, if you want to call it a relationship at this point.
Yeah. And this was the first time too, like now that we've talked quite a bit about a lot of the practical effects, and certainly we've talked in great length about how they've shot some of the stuff within the cockpit. But you brought up a good point, because in this when I was watching the scene, there's a moment when they cut. I think it's kind of like behind the perspective of the child, and you can kind of see his ear, and in the background you can see the lights of the stars twinkling, right? But it's
Right.
very clear now to me that that is a practical effect and it's not CGI, because you couldn't get that doing. I mean, you could, but I don't know that people would spend that much painstaking effort into doing that, right? Normally, it'd just be a black
Yeah.
background, couple little dots, but you get all the blur effect and everything else. I mean, it just adds another level of realism to it. And to your point, I think this is like the cockpit of the Razor Crest is starting to become iconic and I'm not going to compare it to the Millennium Falcon just yet, but there's something about the Millennium Falcon when you look at it and go, oh man, that's it. I mean, I know what that is. There's a lot of moments, a lot of great things that have happened there. My guess is we are going to get that way with the Razor Crest at some point. So if we're not there already.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's becoming that kind of moment there, that view of things.
Yeah. Okay, so they get to Navarro, they land, and there's and I think I talked about this the first time I watched it, but I didn't really say a whole lot. And now I guess what I should say is I don't feel like I really was I conveyed my thoughts well enough on this scene. But when they land and the child and Mandalorian are kind of walking, and they're walking amongst all these great starships that have landed and all that, but he's kind of looking around, and I just wondered, he has this almost like curious look on his face, and I'm starting to think, okay, was he ever here before? And that's probably far fetched, but he does have like is he just in amazement or in wonder of what he's seeing? Like he's just really not got out very much, and he's not been out and explored much, and this is his first time doing so. But you can see the facial expressions. I mean, they spend a lot of time on drawing his face and giving him those looks of like, wow, trying to take it all in. But I just had a question about whether or not he'd actually seen a big town before. Was this the first time ever in a big town, and what that would look like, where he's been this entire time, which I think is interesting in itself, right?
Yeah, it seems like he's taking it all in for the first time for any kind of real civilization, which is probably not quite accurate, because the town that he found him in and they picked him up in seemed like at one point it may have had something, but probably not the bustling city. And I mean, this place is in disarray already, right? It's in ruins in some places. It's got rubble kind of everywhere, especially in this entrance where they have the landing pads and all that. So,
yeah.
But yeah, he certainly seems to be in awe and in amazement to where this is something entirely new for him, which is kind of odd considering he's 50. Figure he'd seen civilization before, but we don't know anything about where he's been for the last 50 years either. So,
yeah, and that's kind of why I brought up the point. Like I'm thinking, if that really is the first time he's seen any of that. So for that first 50 years, was he under the care of his parents? Was he under, his home planet? Was he just completely lost? Was somebody keeping, sheltered up and locked up, a prisoner being held for hostage or payment or ransom? I mean, there's all kinds of things. I mean, your mind can kind of go a lot of different ways, but I'd be curious to hear what other people think, whether or not they think he was just living a normal life until he was captured, just not that long ago, or he was living a very different life, and what that life was like before he met the Mandalorian, or before he was captured, I guess, and kind of held hostage there. So,
right.
So the Mandalorian goes in, delivers the child, and there's an interesting moment there where he's kind of scanning him, and he says he looks healthy, which I asked the question of why. How would he know he's healthy? And maybe it could just be general like Star Trek, Star Wars science, where they do it and it gives you a health check regardless of the alien species. But then I started thinking, well, maybe if this really is truly about like midichlorians in some way, right? And not to bring up midichlorians, but there's got to be some way that they measure the health of this thing. And I'm wondering if maybe he was checking, like, what was he looking for? Was he looking for midichlorian counts? Was he looking for the health of the midichlorians, or was he looking for or am I overthinking this and thinking it's just a general wellness check? He's breathing, his pupils aren't dilated, that kind of stuff, or do you think there's anything more of that?
I think it's a general health check, just to make sure that.
Dang it, Jonesy, you're helping
I know,
me out.
man. I'm way too practical. I'm so sorry.
But, no, go ahead.
I mean, because we don't know much about the biology of these species anyway, right?
Nothing.
We don't know anything. So presumably they don't know anything either.
Right.
And, they know the rarity apparently, and they have some idea of maybe what its abilities are, because we think that's what they're trying to extract is probably midichlorians to bring it to, realistically bring it in, which is probably what they're doing. But Yeah. I mean, the question I had was, why does the fob getting close to the kid, how do the fobs work, for goodness sake? Because
no,
we are never getting an explanation for this. And they seem to work in just totally random ways that defy fobby logic. I don't know.
like, and it feels like that ship has sailed. Like, if we were going to get any background information on how the fobs worked or the technology behind them or anything, it seems like this would have been the season to do so, because you think fast forward to where we are at the very end of the season and they're kind of on the run now, right? We're not really part of the guild because we've already, we've made the sin or done the sin or whatever that is in kind of in all that. But it just feels like that ship sailed. Like we're not going to probably get any information. I don't know. Maybe we will. Maybe they'll surprise us, and maybe there's a fob out for him now later down the road, and we get some. And he's trying to figure out how they're tracking him. I don't know, but yeah, that seems to still be a mystery. And I've heard a lot of theories. I don't think any of them have been bad at all, because they don't really give you a lot to work with here. So any theory right now is a good theory in that regard. But speaking of fobs, so this was when he gets to the client and he kind of asks the question, he's like, how many fobs did you give out? Right. Because he knows that there's tons of other people that had this. There were a number of people that were going out looking for him. And I think the only assurance, he didn't really give him any assurance or give him any answers. He just said that it was very valuable to him and it was important that he, bring this back. And so it was a numbers game for him, right? He was trying to get out as many fobs as he could in hopes that somebody would bring that back. But other thoughts, I guess, on the fobs. And then also, what about your thoughts around IG-11? Was this his fob coming from him, or did it come from somebody else completely different that was also after the child for maybe the same reason or a different reason?
It seems like it came from somewhere else. I mean, it seems like it should have come from the same place, right? Because he's part of the guild. Clearly, he knew the man that was part of the guild, but there's a complete disconnect here about why that is. And I have a feeling it's just kind of, I hate saying sloppy writing, but a bit of sloppy writing just to do that to create the condition for the Mando to be able to, make a decision in episode 2 or chapter 2, whatever they'd call it. Mm-hmm. But I mean, clearly, they gave out to all of them. And of course, Grief Karga confirms that for us as well, right? Yeah. How many fobs did you give out? Or how many people had it? And like everybody did, which I have other questions about. Why are they all sitting in the cantina, ahead of time? So whether they just didn't find them or whether they just gave up early. So some disconnect here on the whole fob thing and just bounty hunting in general, it seems.
Yeah, I think to give them the benefit of the doubt, I think if it were me personally as a bounty hunter, the first time I heard the first 3 people went in, died, and didn't make it out. Okay, maybe this one isn't for me, right? Too big for me. I'm never going to do it. So maybe they're just kind of hanging out. They've got a fob, but they're never really, realistically, they're never going to cash in on it or even try to take that, the bet that they'll be able to collect on the bounty. But yeah. Exactly. So there's so going back to the story, they take the child away, and then we have this like heartbreaking moment where the the child turns around and is like crying, looking at him, and you can kind of see. I mean, you don't, and this is the great thing about the Mandalorian. I mean, we can't see any facial expressions, right? But we can see even physically, like his body language. You can tell that this is pulling at him in some way, and he's not comfortable with it. He doesn't like the fact that it is, but it is. And so he's, that's what eventually makes him kind of turn around. But you got to think that during that moment too, when he's being separated like that, he's thinking about his own self and thinking about him as what, we've got the flashback scenes. So we're privy to what happened there, but him getting kind of separated from his parents and then witnessing his parents die, I think for the most part, I mean, I don't know there's any proof that they live right now, but, witnessing all that and then seeing this baby getting kind of taken away. I think part of that too was him realizing, wow, there's some similarities between me and this child and the fact that we're both orphaned and, we're both separated. He had the benefit of somebody rescuing him. This child's fate is completely unknown, but I draw the parallel to like, if you've ever taken a child and you've taken them to like a daycare and dropped them off for the very first day and you start to walk away and they start crying. I mean, that is like the worst feeling in the world to leave your kid there and not have
You're having a little
contact with them.
Little PTSD here on our experiences of dropping kids off at daycare and stuff like that.
Well, and this is so in the whole fatherhood aspect of this show, and like this is what I've talked to Mike about before too. Like that's the one thing I like the most about this show, and I know Mike really wants the kid to go away. He doesn't want the kid around and all that, and I get it. I mean, there's certain things you could say about that and why that makes sense, but for me, it's just so different for Star Wars. I mean, yes, we have parent and child relationships and father and son relationships, and that's all throughout Star Wars. Most of those, 90% of them, are really terrible relationships, and yet here's one where it's starting to look like a father and son relationship, and they're not even the same species. And I don't know, it's just that fatherhood aspect, the parental aspect of all that I think really resonates with me in The Mandalorian. I think that's what resonated with me from the Lone Wolf books and series that some of this is kind of loosely based on, right? The old the comic books and all that. So, anyways, yeah, it does kind of pull a chord for me.
Yeah, and it's this idea of, I mean, we question again why he would have this connection already, or why he would want to save the kid and go against really everything that's the guild stands for, and really, but again, it kind of goes back to the creed of the Mandos, and maybe not the creed because we don't really know that for sure, but I mean just the whole idea of foundlings, and it had such a profound effect on him that it seems like he's just got this bleeding heart for anybody that's distressed and out on their own, and has nowhere to go, and has no one to take care of them, and no guardian and no parents, and just feels abandoned type of thing. And he's willing to put himself on the line in order to do this, or at least he's going through the motions of what's the right decision to make here, all this conflict within him, and he just can't help himself from thinking about what's happening and asking questions he's not supposed to ask.
Yeah, and so see, he does that, and he kind of breaks the code of the guild. I mean, he could argue that that's when he created the sin by crossing that line,
right?
But you get the sense that he's never done this before, right? He even says like a bounty hunter of your reputation, right, wouldn't be kind of doing this. And so yeah, there is a lot of things that are really going against the grain here. Do you think the Force plays into any of this, like the will of the Force and of all that, or do you think that's completely absent here, and it truly is just one man who's seen enough and has inspiration to do something greater and do something for the good of this single being here because of who he is and where he came from?
Well, if you subscribe to the will of the Force, then there's a strong argument that it's all predetermined, right? It's like Calvinism almost. So yeah, I think if that's kind of your line of thinking, then yeah, this is the way it's supposed to be, and this is the decision he's supposed to make. We don't have there's no choice. It's predetermined, and it's his destiny of Baby Yoda to be picked up and become a foundling at some point.
Yeah. So from there, Mando kind of walks away. He's already, dropped the kid off. You can tell he's already kind of not feeling good about the situation, but he's got bigger things to do. He needs to get the Beskar over and get something created and all that. And so he gets down there, but we get our first real shots of what life is like for the Mandalorians at this point. It is not, they're not living the life here, right? They're living underground. They're living in the sewers. We talked about some of this kind of pre-echoes of this that we saw in season 7 of the Clone Wars. But they're living in shambles, and there's not many of them. In fact, because they're living underground, a little bit later, he mentions that they only come out one at a time, right? Which is kind of weird, and we can certainly talk about that here. Let's just talk about that. So, any kind of thoughts, theories, and I think this is one thing I did speak about in the last show, so I don't want to say much here, but anything that you can think of why they would just come out one at a time? Is it like a sand person thing, hiding their numbers, walking, single file rather than side by side? Is it one of those things, or do you think there's something more here that we're not sure of yet or not aware of yet?
Yeah, and this question was actually posed to me just recently of why they come out one at a time. Yeah, and it's a good question because we don't know. Well, what I took from this is that after the purge, no one knows what their numbers truly are, and I have a feeling that they are trying to disguise what their numbers are. And then we get the line from, what do we call him, the lady who does the forge? Is there a name for
the armor
person? Yeah, the armor. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, we get that, this is the way kind of stuff happening of, they work from the shadows, and then they just have this new way of living. But that's my best guess, is that they're just trying to mask their numbers. They want to be forgotten about for the most part. Yeah. And that there's only onesie twosies out there. Now, why him is kind of the question I come back to. Why is he, was he nominated? It seems like there's some tension there within the clan already. So why is it him? And they're so critical of him at the same time with, who he's, sharing a table with, as I think the line was. So I think those are some of the questions I'd start to drift towards of, he seems to be one of the younger of the crew. I'm starting to get an impression of, at least.
Yeah. And that comes up. Yeah, you're right. Let's talk about. We'll actually touch on that here in just one second. That and some of the other stuff that Mr. Vizsla says there to him, which I think are all kind of eye opening and certainly kind of speak to some of the history there that we've not seen yet, which I think is really cool. The and I guess the other question that we talk about them living in sewers, and so one of the things I think I said in when we did 301 or 300, whenever it was, I said that I would like to see the Mandalorian at some point this series, right when it ends, and this could change. This could probably change tomorrow, but right now, anyways, I would like to see this series go to a point where the Mandalorians are completely restored, or not completely, at least on their getting back to their old ways. They're
Right.
back on Mandalore. They're back. They've reestablished some level of government and people and that kind of thing. And I really would like to see the Mandalorian be the person that's spurring all of this, right? And they could be a little bit different. That's fine if they want to change and evolve and that kind of thing. But do you think we'll ever get that? Do you think we'll ever get that in this series, or is there something else kind of? Is the path a little bit different, and that's something else that'll come later down the road? Are they ever going to return to the great heights that they once were?
I think for this series, what I would like to see is maybe, well, if we want to see that, which I don't know if we need to, but if we do get to there, I would like it to be like the very end,
Yeah.
and work up to something like that, to where we do see the restoration of the Mandalorians, or the the idea that they can now come out of the shadows and reemerge as something of a power, if you will, which is interesting because you have this period of like complete lawlessness right now, or at least perceived lawlessness, right? And it seems like everyone basically agrees on that at this point, a few years after the Empire's fallen. So, it's surprising that they don't come out and assert any kind of authority. And again, it's probably just a numbers game. And I'm curious, like, how many coverts are there? This one's got, I mean, we'll call it maybe a dozen in this one, it seems, something like that. Right. So how many are truly out there, and what are their numbers, and how organized are they across the board to where they know, where each other are at throughout the galaxy?
Yeah, a good point. I would agree that I don't think this is the only covert. I think there are other ones out there. They're just completely splintered. They've been cut off. I mean, the Empire has been reign for so long, and this is kind of a pivotal moment for them. I think this is kind of why, again, I would like to see that, but I would agree would need to be something I would like to see at the end of the series, right? In that, don't put it in the middle of it, because it's just going to overshadow everything. But
right, yeah, we don't want to detract from the stories that we need to tell with this character and the others that we've met.
Yeah, and because the Empire is no longer here, I think that opens up the gateway, if you will, for a lot of these groups to start coming together. But there has to be something that pulls them together. There has to be a moment. There has to be a person, a thing, an event, place, something that pulls all those groups together and reunites the clans of the Mandalore. And then the next phase would be, okay, let's go back to our home planet and see what's there, figure out, how do we take that back over so that we can return to great heights, which, again, I'm waxing way too much stuff here because I don't think that's going to happen. It may not happen in this series, but that would be really cool to kind of see that at some point.
Yeah, but we got a flavor of it in this episode, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on, and maybe post some questions there. Is we did see them band together when it mattered most, and we'll explore a little bit of that as we get further into the episode.
Yeah. There's a earlier. I want to go back to something the client said. He says finding a Mandalorian in these trying times is more difficult than finding the steel. And when he gets there to the covert, that's kind of, we visually get to see that. He's got a huge amount of Beskar steel, and there are not a lot of Mandalorians there. I mean, the ratio is way outnumbered, and it's almost like, dirty money, right? Or this stuff is like, it's very precious to them, but at the same time, it's very hurtful to see it because they know how they got it. In fact, I think what's his name, Paz Vizsla, even says that this was smelted by the Imperials. It's got the Imperial logo right on there, right? I mean, this is like very
blood Beskar.
It is, and it's almost like I can't remember what part of like World War II and Nazis and what they were doing, right? They were stealing a lot of things from the Jews, melting it down, using parts and stuff, rebranding it, and I mean that's just a slap in the face, right, if you will, of what the Empire was like, and to them very similar to what we saw in real history here. But let's talk about the Great Purge, because this is a really fascinating concept, and we knew it happened, right? I mean, it's not a big secret, it's not a big reveal. We knew something happened to the Mandalorians, especially after, or I guess in between the events of the Clone Wars and where we are today. Something happened. We've already speculated on what could have happened there. But any other thoughts, I guess, on the Great Purge? And is this something you think we'll have flashbacks of? I mean, they've kind of broke the seal and allowed for flashbacks to happen. But would you like to see something like that? Would you like to get more context and background into the Great Purge through flashbacks here in the series?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it would add to the story immensely. I mean, especially as we start to develop, and if we revisit the covert at some point, which seems like a fair, chance of happening. I think we know that Jon Favreau, of course, was Vizsla, so we know he's around to be able to do some of this stuff.
Yep.
And I think it would just add to the story. I mean, it's just like the flashbacks we had with Mandalorian. I think they pose questions for us to speculate on, and when we finally get some answers here and there, they're actually meaningful, and they fit the story, and they give us something extra that we didn't have before. And so I think they've mentioned enough. I think you almost have to go back and say something about it or give us some idea of what happened. And I think a flashback would be amazing to see, because maybe we'll see Jedi, or maybe we'll see the Empire or Sith. I mean, or Vader or something like that. I mean, you could bring other characters in. I'm not hoping for that, people. I promise. I don't really want some of that. But
everything's on the table right now. That's all we're saying.
Right. We don't need to see Vader. Okay. We like bringing Vader into everything, it seems. But yeah, but I think this is one of those cases that where if we saw something of a flashback and we see how it happened or some idea of it, I think that would be really, really interesting to see narratively, from a narrative standpoint. But also, I think visually would just be amazing.
Yeah. And speaking of going back to the walking and, I guess, coming out one at a time, the armorer has a great line in there where she says, "Our secrecy is our survival is our strength." And I think you're right. I think it speaks to what that's kind of a right on the nose, at least for me, about they do come out one at a time and only one at a time. And, they don't all look completely different either, right? So if you see one Mandalorian, they're in the shadows, you're going to think it's probably the same one. So it is a good tactic. But they've got to be hunted. And this is kind of what the armorer says a little bit later about the Mandalorian, about how he is the prey and he is the hunter. And that when you live in those environments, when you're kind of having a dual role in that capacity, you're always on the hunt. You always have to be watching your back. You can't be labeled as a coward, like Paz Vizsla calls him, right? And says that he's a coward for doing that. And he also mentions that he's been sharing a table with the Empire, like you said. And it makes me wonder, like, do you think we'll get any background on what he was doing prior to the Mandalorian? Like, I don't know how long he's been a bounty hunter. Did it predate, the events that happened? Did it was it going on during like the Return of the Jedi events, or was it past that? We don't know anything about that. But do you think we're going to get any sense of what he was doing that far back? I mean, and I'll let you answer, but this, again, the idea of flashbacks, I think, is really cool, because we don't have a lot of them in Star Wars, but it is a great way to tell bits and pieces of story and give you enough information to kind of feel satisfied with everything going on and build on them. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think so. No, I don't think we need flashbacks for this. I think this is one of those cases where, him and Kara, as they're talking about something or another, you can get the flavor of what he was up to and what he was doing. It's kind of like what they did in Rise of Skywalker with Poe. We started to unravel certain things about his past in a more as other things were going on at the same time.
Yes.
So we don't, we get them kind of in those moments, and then same premise though, you can build on those slowly over the course of a couple of episodes, 3 or 4 episodes, or whatever it might be. And we start to build in some of that past without having to be so on the nose about it and just say straight up, here's what he was doing, things like that. It's just more interesting storytelling, I think, that way. But I think, do I think we need it? I don't know, unless there's some idea or something that we can gravitate or that we can grab onto and say that it fits what we need to know for the events that we have going on or the events that we have coming up. But in general, I think we're just kind of assuming that he's been doing this for a while. And again, maybe we learn why he's the chosen one, for lack of better words, for the covert to be able to.
Whoa, sorry, God, no.
I know, yeah, right. So I've just made him a Jedi. I've just made him Anakin. So yeah, he was before Rey goes. Anyway, but this is one of those things where I think maybe we can understand better why he was the one that they decided to put out there as their one, and why that is, and maybe he's the youngest of the group too.
Maybe the last one in, low man on the totem pole, kind of thing.
Right, that might be true.
All right, so I guess the other interesting thing that happens in the scene, and there's a lot happens. I mean, honestly, I was thinking about this, like with the exception of the very end where they're rescued, and this scene is kind of like, there's a lot here to digest. I mean, the majority of what we're talking about is probably going to be in this scene here, but they break out into a fight, right? So Paz Vizsla and the Mandalorian pull out these vibro blades, and they go at each other. And at first, it was like, okay, someone's going to stop this, and they don't. And so I have this question for you, and I don't think Mike and I talked about this, but do you think that was like pure posturing? And because she doesn't, again, she does not interfere for a little bit. She sits there and just watches, nor does anybody else in the background. And so it makes you think, okay, either this is just a common thing that happens. It's like, oh, two guys just getting fired up. They're really not going to kill each other. And it does look like they kind of stopped short of actually trying to stab each other. So maybe they did pull back their punches or pull back their stabs. But she definitely doesn't intervene in any way, nor does anybody in the background. So this is just kind of an everyday thing. Is it two people just getting a lot off their chest? Angst, teenage angst? Is it just, measuring sticks and all that? I mean, what's going on here?
Yeah, it felt like an episode of National Geographic for a little bit there, wasn't it? Then the lion has found its mate and now it needs to defend its territory.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And that type of thing. Yeah, but I think some of it was posturing. I think some of it that this is how they settle disputes. This is the way, I guess. But I mean, this is the thing that they do when they get into a spat. They're going to who's going to assert dominance, and you exert strength. And again, I think they didn't intend to kill each other. You could probably make an argument against that, considering he scraped it against his armor. He got him pretty good, I would suppose. But I don't know that they ever intended to terminate one another.
Yeah.
But I think at the same time, I think this is definitely, I mean, if it would have happened, they would have been like, okay, this is how we settle things. That's an unfortunate series of events, but we're that's just how things are around here. But again, I think the armor seems to be the mother figure, the matriarch of the group, to make sure that okay, you've had your moment. Please stop.
Right. Please stop. Settle down. Put the knives down.
Right. Yeah. We've had enough, boys.
Yep.
Put the toys away.
So my thoughts, I guess, on this are, I think if we were talking about an era of within the Mandalores, like pre this period, right? You go back even to the Clone Wars. That probably was a way they settled things. I have a hard time thinking that is still the way they think, and that is still what they do, given their numbers are so low. I mean, they can't. I mean, there's a part of them that they know they need to stick to one another. They have to kind of lift each other and watch each other's backs. And they may have arguments from time to time, but I don't think for 1 second either one of them really truly was set out to try to kill each other, only because things are so different right now. It's not in their best interest to continue the old ways and have a, spat out of over something like this and kill each other and take their numbers from 12 to 11 or 10. Right. And so I think that's why the armor, I don't think she intervened, because I don't think she thought they were really going to do it. It's like, okay, I'm going to let them have their moment, talk it over, whatever, fight it out, but they're not going to really kill each other here. But they certainly did seem like they were really coming close to it, and I think they kind of pulled their punches back there at the end.
Right, and correct me if I'm wrong. I think in Rebels, didn't we? I think it was Rebels. Maybe it was Clone Wars. I get confused easily. I think it was Rebels where we do see this is how they get the mantle of leadership. You challenge, and if you win, it's it. And you have the right to your challenge, and to be able to go forward with it.
Right, and the other person either concedes or they die. Right, and that's
right.
Kind of like that to me is kind of, again, like the old ways. I don't think they're capable of doing that right now. Maybe they come to that again later down the road. But if they don't, I think that'd be great too, because this could be a sign again of things changing for them, things evolving, them becoming a little bit different than what they were.
Right.
We get a mention of the significance of removing the helmet. This is kind of where it's first established. I mean, she asked him straight up, "Has your helmet been removed?" And he says no. That's kind of a big thing. I think we've probably talked about that and speculated enough about what it is and why those helmets can't come off. But your thoughts or reasons?
I think it's just
why?
one of those. Yeah, it's one of those things when you sign up and you commit. When especially this is probably an age thing too. Whenever you get your armor, you commit to the clan, you commit to the way of life, and once you do that, this is what you've agreed to, and this is the sacrifices you make in order for that. This whole idea of anonymity of sorts.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, there's like this concept of keeping things on and not removing them. This is not uncommon, right? Even in our real world, especially when you talk about like religions or creeds and that sort of thing, it's not uncommon to wear vestments or, bandages or, there's all kinds of things that you wear, and it's just part of the tradition, part of the symbolism of it all. And it does not come off for whatever reason you shower with it or do whatever.
Yeah, even to the idea of paint when for coming of age and things like that. It's masks and things like they're part of our culture and in so many different ways and so many different cultures. So again, not surprising that we'd have something like this. Yeah,
it's easy to accept it, right? And it's kind of cool. Like, oh yeah, he keeps his helmet on. Now I don't know what he does when he's showering or he's with another partner, but that's for another episode. Actually, we'll talk about that.
A lot of helmet clanging.
A lot of helmet clanging going on there. And then we got the line, "This is the way." We don't need to talk about that because it's been said a billion times already.
Hard not to say it at this point. Jeez.
I was talking to somebody the other day, had nothing to do with Star Wars, and they just out of nowhere hit me with it. "This is the way," and I'm like, okay, I guess you're a Star Wars fan, and did not know that. But the Mudhorn. So we talked about this a couple episodes, and whether what was the criteria that need to be met in order for a signet to be revealed. There is one interesting aspect that comes up here, and that he says it was a noble kill, right? And it was, and then he mentions also here, and I want to get your thoughts on this, but he mentions the child was his enemy, which on the surface seems, take it at a literal sense, seems a little severe that you would label a child as an enemy when this child had, really was no threat. Well, I guess we know he could be a huge threat at this point, but nonetheless, I mean, it wasn't a threat to him while that was going on, but he tells the armor that this was an enemy. And I wondered about that. Like, why wouldn't he just say this was, why do you have to use the word enemy? Why couldn't he have said this was a bounty or not my friend or something else? But enemy almost implies that this thing was against him and trying to kill him in some way.
I can only presume that this is, referencing back to Jedi and Sith and the Mandalorian, just the conflict between them all. I think this is just an extension of all of that. I think this is what they've done for generations. They've had conflict, and as soon as he saw it was a Force user, I think that's what spurred the enemy comment.
Yeah,
I think it's really as basic as that. That's about the best I've come up with. I mean, that's seems to be the most overt answer at the very least.
Right. We had the flashback. We've talked. I don't know if there was anything new. I mean, if we watch these as they come out, certainly there's more to talk about, but there really wasn't anything significant here other than we actually get to see the B2 battle droid, right there looking like he's about to pop off on the Mandalore as a kid. But anything that caught your eye, anything else that you want to add about the flashback scene?
No, it was cool to see droid ships and things like that back. I mean,
yeah.
What was weird is I was like, it's the first time we've seen battle droids like on live action. I was like, no, but these were a lot better looking than some of the ones we got.
They were cool looking from the prequels.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if it was the animation got better or the textures or what, but they looked cooler. Yeah.
Right. But you saw the brutality of it all though, too. I mean, they're just attacking a village and you don't even know why. You have no idea why. It's just brutal killing. And then the super battle droid just kind of, walking around just point blank shooting people.
Yeah. So he heads back to talk with Grief Karga. And at that point, Grief Karga, like I really question his sanity here. And I don't understand why he's doing this. I mean, he's boasting to everybody in that cantina about, hey, the Mandalorian, and you're so awesome, and I knew you could do it. And he seems like really happy. But why was he going on and boasting about that? Was because he really kind of put him in a bad position, right? If you think about it.
Yeah.
He's singling him out. And everybody, obviously everybody has a fob. Everybody wanted this bounty. And he's gone in there to collect this. And he's already telling him, look, I just want my next assignment, my next assignment. I don't want anything else from you. Just give me my next. He wants to get on with his life. And Karga's like really making a big kind of deal about this. And so the question I have is whether or not this was something he was doing intentionally. Was he trying to single him out? Was he trying to put a target on his back? Or was he just completely ignorant and just kind of really, taken by the moment, the fact that he was, it was his, he was under his direction, his leadership or whatever, he was able to get the child what was going on here?
Yeah, he was riding that high. I mean, he was greed. I mean, he also had a handsome reward in it all, and he was exceptionally happy. And yeah, he's his best client, he's best friend and everything now, right? Because he's going to bring him, riches beyond riches, for a while now and continue that relationship. And yeah, it's just boastful.
Yeah.
For no better reason except that, he got paid too, and he just was ready to celebrate.
Yep.
But again, it doesn't make sense though why you would turn everybody against each other. I mean, I guess it's good for competition, but in these days it seems like the guild work is kind of hard to come by for anything of any kind of substantial value. So why would you irritate everyone, and potentially put a mark on you, because there's no reason for them not to turn on you. I'm sure there's someone else ready to take Grief Karga's spot.
Yeah.
And waiting too. So it's a bit of an odd thing to do and to rub their noses in it, but he's also probably feeling pretty safe. Him and Mando, BFFs.
Right, exactly. Well, for a few more moments anyways.
Right.
The there's one line in there just quickly I want to touch on where the Mandalorian says the Empire is gone, the Republic's a joke. I really I want them to dig into that. Like, I want to see, because we've never really gotten that. I mean, everything that we've ever gotten from the Republic, for the most part, well, hold on, let me back up.
No,
We haven't gotten a lot from the Republic, first off.
Right.
But what we do have, they always seem to be kind of painted as the good guys. We don't really get to see them blunder and screw up and make these really, I don't know, horrible mistakes. And even if they aren't true mistakes, I think it would be interesting to see it from the perspective of the Mandalore or from everybody else about how this really isn't that much better, or maybe even that much different, right? Now that the Empire's gone, that the Republic's in charge, that things aren't any better, and that they are screwing up, and they are maybe making things worse. And, I would like to see all of that. Do you think they're going to dig into that? Do you think they have enough time to dig into that? Or is this just something that was kind of an off comment and we have to accept it and we'll pick it up later in, comics or books or whatever else?
It's a bit off comic, although we do revisit this a little bit in a later episode when we get the, when the X-Wings kind of come in, we get an idea of, that they do have some organization to it. But yeah, you're right. This isn't the first time though. And our friend Becca from Target's Top Shelf would be very happy for us to say this, but this is almost like a tie-in to some of the books of sorts, right? With, I think, Bloodline, and we see some of that dissension in the New Republic, and these ideas that, that there is conflict. They still can't get anything done. They can't get resources and help to where they're needed. Yeah. And the whole galaxy is seeing this. I mean, we see it on this planet too, that this place is in complete shambles, and their place is long forgotten. I mean, this is what, Tatooine was. It was just, everything is just a speck of dust and no one cares about it. And they can only tend to so many things at once, especially with a fledgling Republic. Even after several years, these things just take so long to really get any kind of organization to it. And I have no doubt that the galaxy at large probably views the New Republic as a bit of a joke and something that can't sustain itself or support itself and whatever their objectives are. Yeah. But I mean, yeah, political crap probably, but at the same time, it's running rampant. There's a lot of opportunity for it to fill in the spaces now.
I think it's a combination of, there's definitely the political side. I 100% agree there. I think it's just a numbers game. I mean, this galaxy is huge, right? Yeah. And you think about the Empire at their height, although things sucked for a lot of people, there's an argument to be made that they at least had enough numbers to keep law and order. Now, did it benefit them? Absolutely. And only them, probably, right? There probably weren't any deals being made, and there probably wasn't any law that was out there that didn't benefit the Galactic Empire in some way directly. But that is so put that aside, you remove all of that, the Republic is not in a position to come in and restore order. They're not that large. They don't have the numbers. They're still rebuilding. We know they're on the heels of the First Order not very much long from now. They're going to be kind of on their back heels and, taken down by the First Order in a massive way. So it's hard for them it's hard for anybody to, and I guess what I'm saying is I think the Mandalorian is right. I think the Republic is a joke, even though some of us that are long fanboys of the Republic and the Rebellion and even the Resistance, I mean, the reality is they don't have the numbers, and they kind of rely on the goodwill of people to kind of keep law and order and continue to do the good things and the right things, and that's just not the reality. Again, the galaxy is just too big, and kind of to Stargate's SP's comment there, he says, I'm not sure Star Wars universe could ever actually be successfully governed. I don't disagree with that. I think it's just too insurmountable of a task for any one thing to kind of do. And so, but all that kind of went wayside when they got rid of the Senate, right? And even then, that's a whole nother story. We could get into that, but we're not going to.
Yeah, and a Return of the Jedi, it kind of seems like anarchy a little bit.
Yeah, no, I would agree there as well. Okay, let's talk about the rescue, because, he's in the driver's seat, getting ready to turn the key and head out, and looks over and he sees that little knob, and it all kind of comes back to him. And this is a huge turning point for him, right? I mean, he decides to head back over there, and so begins the rescue. But before we get into the weapon, which I want to talk about, but any thoughts there on him kind of making that, doing that 180?
It's just one of these things. It's weird, the things that'll set you off, and just reaching out and not seeing the ball on there is the one thing that just reminded him of, you can't leave someone behind. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of where I was going when I was watching it this week of, he wasn't, someone came and found him, and that he needed help. Someone found him and gave him that opportunity, and he feels like he needs to repay that in some way. And, this is his chance to do that. So he made the decision to really kind of throw his career away of sorts, if you want to call it a career, but his way of doing things, and kind of just go with his own, and really probably more than the Mandalorian way of doing things, right? You just whatever you feel is right, that will support the clan and grow the clan, the foundlings of the future, then, you make that choice and then you live with the choice. And he did. And, he, to his credit, he made the choice, and that was all there was to it. There was no second guessing. There was no doubt. It was just, here's my objective. I'm going to go accomplish it now, regardless of the cost.
Yeah, I would. Yeah. This is, I think the significance is, I think will come out a little bit more in season 2, and we certainly get more of that in season 1, but he really does. I mean, this is a huge change. And again, of his reputation and his caliber and all of that, it's a big change, is all I'm saying. And I don't know what, again, it's probably a combination of things. It could be the fact that, he feels like he was in the same situation at one point. It could just be a true, sincere affection for this child, either, force or not, some way. There's something there. There's a connectedness there between him and the child. But that's a big statement for him to kind of turn his back on the career and turn his back on the life that he's had for so long. That's been really good to him. I mean, you think about it, he's got all this Beskar, and he's been very successful. He's got a lot of notoriety now, and we see that later on. And people are trying to take him in and turn him in for a bounty. So it's a big change. But let's talk about the Ambon rifle, because we mentioned, what was it? No, this is a different podcast. Sorry, I'm thinking a different show. I was talking about like the coolest Star Wars weapon and what would you get, and I in another show, and I was talking about the Ambon rifle was like has surpassed the DL-44 for me in terms of like weapons, even the lightsaber. Like I think I would want this rifle before a lightsaber now, just because it's got so many cool uses, and we get to see another one here that he's able to kind of use that the fork at the very end, right? The tasing fork. He gets to use that as almost like kind of a radar, and listen in on the conversation. But that conversation is where we get there's a lot said in just a few lines. And let me just read this here, and I want to get your thoughts on it. The client says, "I don't care. I order you to extract the necessary material and be done with it." Dr. Pershing says, "He explicitly ordered us to bring it back alive." The client, "Finish your business quickly, as I can no longer guarantee your safety." All right. So just tell me what you think. Give me your best theory. Speculate on what's going on here, and why they're kind of arguing back and forth about this.
So my guess is that now that they have the asset, and they have the kid, I think now it's probably getting out quick that they do. And I imagine they're not the only ones looking for it. And they've got to do whatever they need to do quickly in order to press whatever advantage they have and whatever the directive is that they're under. And I think they want to make sure that they're the only one who have this kind of information and this, whatever they're extracting, or assuming it's midichlorians or something like that. And I think that's generally what they're trying to do. I mean, they have to be the one and the only, and they probably have directions. It's like, do this and then kill the kid to make sure that no one else finds this. We don't want anybody, we don't need the Jedi resurrecting or anything like that. We don't need anybody else coming around and poking around that this potential is, still survives in the galaxy.
Yeah. And I threw up a quote here from Brick Republic Clones. It says, what do you guys think about the scientist working on the child? He had the Camino cloning patch on. I've seen a lot of discussion about this. I went and just for my own sake went out and verified that it was a Camino patch. And yes, it is a Camino patch that he's wearing. I mean, it's kind of, you can't see it 100%, but I mean, it's pretty much there. I mean, there's only a couple pieces that are missing. And if you kind of put those pieces in, it's actually like the Camino patch that we saw from Attack of the Clones. But, so, and it really kind of, it begs this question about what is it that they want, right? We've talked about the midichlorians. Are they extracting those? I think when I talked about on the original, when we talked about this in 301, I'd mentioned that maybe this is what they needed, the Empire, or maybe it's, Sidious's henchmen somewhere on Exegol. They're looking for something to help kind of bring him back to life or continue to keep him alive until that whole process can happen and his life can be restored. There's a lot of different ways that we can talk with, a lot of different theories here in terms of what they're doing. But outside of midichlorians, is there something to be said about them just wanting to clone this child for some reason? And it could be to harvest more midichlorians. It could be they want to infuse the next generation of clones in some way and make them super clones or give them the ability to be force sensitive in some way. Maybe that's it. Maybe there's some like natural inherent ability in the species that makes them, force sensitive. And so they can extract that or splice DNA in some way to create this new batch of clones and allow for these force sensitive users. I mean, what's your craziest and best theory, whatever you got here?
Well, I don't, not to give the counterpoint to that. I think if that was the case, they'd want the kid alive. And I think that's the doctor's point of view. is, if we're going to do anything with this and study and do more, why would you terminate it? There's so much untapped. You have so many more opportunities. If you keep it alive, you can continue extracting more. You can continue to test. You can continue to try different things without ruining it's your, what do they call that? Your control, right?
Yeah.
And this is your petri dishes and all of this stuff. You have your control, and why would you want to get rid of that? And again, I think one of the things I would think of is that you could bridge with Rise of Skywalker, of course, is that we need something for the Emperor. There's something that is needed. This is the potential for it. But again, why would we terminate it? I think that's the one thing I just can't get my arms around. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless they were wanting to be the only ones, and they knew that their time was limited. They wouldn't be able to do this. They don't have the resources to defend themselves, that type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's right. I mean, if he wants them alive or dead, it seems like whatever it is they're trying to extract can be extracted regardless if this thing's alive or dead.
Right.
So, and there's too many unknowns yet, but I think they're not going to pull a Lost on us or a J.J. Abrams and plant the seed and not pick it up, right? I don't think that's just nothing. I don't think it's anything Jon Favreau would do, and I don't think it's anything Dave Filoni would do. We may not get it immediately. Filoni's shown that. I mean, he's laid these little, secret things in there that we want to know more about, and we don't get it until a season later or 2 seasons later, or maybe at the finale in some cases. So I think they'll come back and revisit this, and hopefully it'll be sooner than later, but I don't think it's forever gone. So looking forward to that. Let's just give me your thoughts on the removal of the stormtroopers, because there's a lot. I mean, he gets to use every single one of these weapons. We didn't even talk about whistling birds, which is what you can see in the background there, but we got to see that as a new weapon. And I like this idea of every couple of episodes, him getting more and more weapons. I think that'd be really cool. Keep things interesting. Almost like almost like a James Bond type thing. Or if you want to go back to the cheesy 80s, Greatest American Hero, right? Where they introduce these new powers and these new abilities that we've never seen before. It just keeps the show fresh and exciting. But your thoughts on how he took those poor stormtroopers out. And I guess the general question, do you think they were stormtroopers? Mike and I talked about that as well, whether or not these guys were really stormtroopers, or were they just henchmen that found stormtrooper armor off these dead stormtroopers at some point and threw them on. I mean, we have no reason to believe they're not stormtroopers, given they were working for the client, who was, ex-Imperial in some way. But thoughts on, I guess, all that?
Yeah, and Vizsla seems to confirm that they're Imperial, right, and that these are legit. I don't have any reason to dispute some of that. I think this was cool. I mean, there were some elements here that are always fun. These spy type of movies where they have to take the bad guys out one by one and in secret. They also have a little bit of a flair of some of the old horror movies like Alien. I think it was one of the ones that kept surfacing for me. The lights on the guns, and you don't know what the terror is that's going to get you, from behind and all of that. And I love that we got a variety, though. We got the barbecue, which I thought was pretty cool. But also, I think whistling birds were probably one of the cooler weapons we've seen in a while, too. I mean, we weren't quite sure how they would work when he got them as the extra of the Beskar, and of course we knew it was going to get used, but pretty cool weapon. That's insanely powerful to have, especially if you're outnumbered and outgunned. You're never outnumbered and outgunned if you're a Mandalorian, I suppose. Right. But yeah, we got to see that. We got to see vibroblades. We got a variety of things, and I thought that was fun. I thought this was a different way or a different aspect of the character. He just doesn't go in guns blazing to everything. Yep. He does have a bit of I don't know, I hate to call it stealth, but a bit of a stealth boogeyman type of aura about him as well. I like the boogeyman. Actually, I like that word now.
Boogeyman's cool.
Right.
He's more surgical, right, in terms of how he goes about it, more methodical in terms of how how he approaches these. And we see that later again as well when they're on the space station, I think, and the lights go out. And that's when we, kind of like what you said earlier, we get kind of like this aliens effect or this aliens ambiance, or, where he's going in methodically taking out one by one. But this is the first time that we see this. And again, we will see that a little bit later. And this whole thing with him using the weapons, I love that it held back to like the last episode where he says, "I'm a Mandalorian, weapons are my life," right? Religion. We saw that. Yeah. Or religion. Yeah. We saw his religion on full display here as he was taking out all these stormtroopers, which I think was pretty amazing. I mean, he used everything. The cable, he used the knife, he used the flamethrower, he used his rifle, disintegrated one of them. All of it. And then, of course, whistling birds at the very end.
The armor went with that one, though.
What's that?
The armor went with him when he disintegrated him.
Yeah. Well, you're going to be hung up on that, aren't you?
I might be.
Yeah.
I might be turning into Mike
here, folks. We need to maybe turn into Mike. Oh, all right. So let's wrap this up because we're kind of getting short on time here. But so it turns into the escape is what I'm calling this, because eventually it was him turned in the bounty. Then it was then it was a rescue, and then it quickly goes from a rescue to an escape because he's completely pinned down. He's trying to get out of there, and Grief Karga and all of them now know that he's got the baby because the fob starts going off on everybody, which I think was overdone, but it got the point. It told the point, right? Everybody's fob started going off. The alarms started blazing that the Mando the child was on the move again, right, and wasn't in the custody of the client. But they've got him pinned down, and he's really he doesn't have a lot of options, and gets completely rescued by out of nowhere from the cavalry. Essentially comes in, the covert comes in, the 12 Mandalorians that they are, and this kind of speaks to just how powerful these guys are. I mean, they come in out of the sky, which is one, they've got the element of surprise, which I think is awesome. But this is our first time seeing the Mandalorians in live action like this. I mean, we saw this throughout the Clone Wars series all the time, so it's not unusual to see that, especially kind of in that last 4 episodes or whatever it was, where we got to see them in full force and fighting against Darth Maul and everybody else. But the point is, what did you think about this? I know you're a huge clone fan, but what was that like to actually see them in live action? And did you think they pulled it off?
Yeah, I think the scene was really well done and really exciting. And again, it kind of came out of nowhere. Some people probably guessed it. I'm not very good at guessing this type of stuff, but it was really cool to see them all come out. Now, the question I have for you though, Albert, is what made them decide to all help the Mandalorian here? I mean, what was the make or break? I mean, they seemed like they were in vague agreement, with this is the way kind of stuff. But now all of a sudden, everybody is, racing to his rescue. The cavalry has arrived, like you said. So why now? Because they know they have to relocate the covert now. Right. So what was so special about this moment, and kind of how did they know? I'm guessing they had eyes on this, but what do you think?
Yeah. So I think the easy explanation for at least for why they knew is just word got out, right? I mean, the talk of the town at that point was the child's been rescued. Maybe they put 2 and 2 together. It kind of speaks to a crazy theory I have, and I think we've talked about it on the show. If not, we did it off camera, so I'll be more than happy to share it, even though I don't think it's a great theory, but it's a fun theory. And it's that I think the Mandalorians and the Mandalorian all believe that the newest foundling is the child, right? Okay, so and just stay with me. So if you suspend the suspension of disbelief or the belief here that that's true, then they have essentially 2 potential people that should be part of the covert now, and they're under attack. They're about to be killed. They need to go in and protect not just the Mandalorian, but they need to protect the child because he is by proxy now, or at least they're
bound to one another.
Yeah, they're bound to one another, and they look at him as a foundling of some sort. Now, whether or not that they expand upon that, I'm not saying that at some point you're going to have this child or Baby Yoda run around in Mandalorian armor and Beskar. I think that'd be awesome if he started wielding the blade and he got the Darksaber later on. But I'm completely going off the rails here. But I think that would be interesting if they did take that approach and they saw them both as this. I think they would make sense given their numbers, given how decimated they are, and that this is the way of them all kind of sticking together, backing each other up. And even if it does mean, hey, we're going to have to pick up and leave, that's fine. We've at least saved 2 potential people. And right now it's about rebuilding and regrowth and not allowing any of us to die for any reason whatsoever.
Right. I mean, and again, now they've exposed themselves. And so there's going to be questions. I would imagine this will get around pretty quickly as to, are the Mandalorians back? Are they a threat? And maybe it doesn't matter at this point because it's kind of a backwater planet or something like that. But it was an interesting question that was posed to me. I wanted to kick it over to you and see what you thought.
Yep. We get that final moment there between Grief and Mando where he says you broke the code, which is the sin, right? The sin being that he broke the code of the Bounty Hunters Guild and should have never done this to begin with. And there's one thing, I guess the final question, or maybe the final question, but and I posed this to Mike on the last show that we did, but he takes a shot at Grief and luckily hits the plate of Beskar that he'd stashed away in his jacket there. Mm-hmm. Do you think the Mandalorian knew that? Do you think that was a called shot and did that to save his life? Or do you think it was just pure coincidence and pure luck on Grief Karga's part that he was shot and just happened to get shot in that piece of Beskar and it saved his life? I
kind of think it was intentional where he shot him because he could have shot him in the head too, I suppose. Mm-hmm. I mean, center of mass, I guess you shoot in the center of the body, but I don't know, it kind of seems like he's too good of a shot, and he's too good at remembering the details that he would not have, avoided that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go on the limb that it was intentional. He didn't really have a beef with Grief Karga. He was just doing his job, and he seemed like he was all right, I guess.
Right.
There's no reason for him to save him though either. To play devil's advocate here, there's no real reason for him to, except maybe he just had a feeling that, maybe he can still be useful at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would. Yeah, and I'm kind of with you in the same boat. I think for him it was like, okay, he had that piece of Beskar there. I'll shoot him there, and if it's there, fine. He's alive, no big deal. Exactly. And if he's not, well, at least I tried. I gave it my best effort, Mayor. So, but that, yeah. So, and then finally the closing shot, which I think was one of the greater moments in the series. I mean, it's certainly for this episode, but just the salute. Oh my God. And Jonesy's doing a salute for you on the podcast. But yeah, that moment where he sees, I think it's Paz Vizsla, if I'm not mistaken, who it's supposed to be.
You can see the big gun on his back.
Yeah. But he gives him the salute, which, that's a pretty big turnaround in terms of where they were holding knives against each other there at the very end. But, we get the line of, I've got to get one of those. And that's kind of foreshadowing to, what we get way later. I think it was almost the last episode of it. Right. But yeah, just great shot there. Great way to close out end it for the most part. But, were you expecting to see that scene, or what were your first thoughts, I guess, when you saw it?
It makes sense that they would acknowledge, that they've got to go and rebuild, and for them to acknowledge, we're all in this together. There's still a family of sorts. Yeah. And, then the salute was a bit much. I don't understand the whole military aspect of that, because it was a pretty, firm salute, what he was doing. But at the same time, I think it just shows that camaraderie, and that they put all the personal crap aside whenever they have to. And that they do, they bond together whenever they need to, and they do what has to be done. And, we'll move on and we'll do it all over again.
Do you know what the origin of the salute is?
No.
This is not normal Star Wars Cantina cast talk, but the salute originated because people, like knights in armor, they would have to lift up their helmet in order to see each other, to make eye contact, to acknowledge that they're seeing. And so that the action of moving your hand up was to lift the visor of the helmet so you could see eyes and put it back
holding
down.
It, I guess.
Yeah. And so eventually it just turned into this. But I thought it was cool because the Mandalorian.
This is what you get with Albert Padilla, ladies and gentlemen.
In the basement. So I'd like to plug the basement. No, I'm kidding. We're not going to do that. But yeah, so that's where that kind of, the reason I brought that up was because at least they're wearing helmets, right? They're saluting, and there's kind of some cool symbolism there with the salute. Right. I think they just did it because we all know what that means, and it's a sign of respect and camaraderie or whatever else. And so you kind of get that closure for, okay, they were at the point of killing each other with knives, to, hey, he just rescued him. But not only did he rescue him, he didn't have to go do that little aerial escort. It almost is what he's doing. He's essentially escorting him out of the planet to make sure nothing else kind of attacks him. So it was a good sign. It was a good gesture. So great line, or I should say great scene, even better line that was delivered there. And then finally, the last thing we'll talk about tonight is just that the parental moment for me, which was him, taking the little ball off that thing and giving it back to him. I mean, we've all done that as parents, right? The kids wanted something. You've told them no a million times. You've been really firm, really stern about it. But then just something, changes. Yeah. And you give up and you give in and you go ahead and just give the child that anyways. And I think that was a great moment. And again, it's why I'm here for this series. I love everything else about it. I want all the other Star Wars aspects, whether it's the Darksaber or bounty hunters or Mandalorians or the Force or X-Wings and all that. That's all great stuff. But what I keep coming back to for me, the story, and what I always come back to with Star Wars is the family aspects. And I think the idea that we're getting a really cool relationship between a parental figure and a child, and we get moments like this that really resonate, that are very realistic and grounded in our own reality, I think are really awesome.
Especially what we see here in the next few episodes, which I'm really excited to talk through, because you start to see the duality of that relationship, and the symbiotic type of side of it, as well as sometimes this is when you get protective in overly protective ways.
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, it's still a great moment to kind of end it on, and it's just pulls at the heartstrings a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, awesome. I think that's it. I think that brings us to the very end. I mean, we get the fly off, which is cool. It was, again, it all feels like Star Wars. So pretty exciting stuff. All right. Any final thoughts on, I guess, this episode overall, the sin, and maybe even just Deborah Chow and what she did there?
I love the way that she shot this. There were so many times in it that we were just different types of shots that we had. And I really liked the episode. I think she did 2 episodes, right? Both of these, I really liked just everything about it, the way that she frames up things. And I really, really enjoyed it. And this is still perhaps my favorite episode. There's another that kind of runs pretty close to it. But, this one, just for what we got across the board, we get a bit of lore, we get a bit of action, we get everybody coming to save the day. And we have a lot of speculative type of items. And I just think it was just tons of fun. And I think this is when this came out, the first time, we're like, this is what we were here for.
Right.
This is what we signed up for with this, the series, and it delivered in every single way.
Yep. Agreed. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us on this episode. Before we go, I just want to say thank you to everybody that joined us tonight on the live show. There were a lot of people here, a lot of great questions, a lot of great conversations going back and forth. We definitely appreciate those. And when we can work them into the show, we certainly will do that. So thank you all for your participation and for being good people too. Like everybody break out and fights or arguments, which is awesome. So thanks for doing that. We, again, like Jonesy mentioned, we do our live shows every Sunday night now. And outside of this past Sunday, because we had a little hiccup there, but that's, every Sunday night we do the live shows. And I think on Tuesday afternoons, we release those. So feel free to join us and tell your friends about us. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you guys want to catch the live shows, please subscribe to the podcast. And we're always looking for good feedback, whether that's in social media or you want to leave iTunes reviews, all that. We'll definitely read those out loud on the show and call you out. So thanks for doing all of that. All right. Any final thoughts before we wrap this one up?
Nope. Let's get out of here before you launch a whistling bird at me.
Oh, look at that. Okay. Well, that's it for this show. We'll be back next week. In just a few days, actually, to talk about Chapter 4, Sanctuary. Right. And we'll get our first look at Cara Dune, which is going to be cool to talk about. So we'll see you guys next week.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.